And welcome to Conservatives Talk.
And there's only one thing left to say, and now it's time to get to work, Republicans.
Yes, and we're also going to talk about the big 2A win that just happened down in New Orleans. And welcome to Conservatives Talk. My name is Justin.
And this is Jamie.
And as always, we like to start off every episode making sure that you're hitting the like button and the share button on every single platform that you run across any of the content that we produce on, as well as subscribing to that platform. That way you'll always be able to stay up to date on anything that we have that we are producing and putting out there. And make sure you're also going to our website at conservativestalk.org and becoming a sponsor by hitting the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner or the lower right-hand corner and helping us out with what you're able, because every little bit goes a long way towards allowing Jamie and I to be able to continue to produce this content, as well as being able to one day eventually take over the world. And with that in mind, Jamie, you want to give your first reminder?
Boycott hometown headlines. We're almost there. It's going to happen.
It will.
Continue to push forward. We have to get liberal media out of Northwest Georgia, and it starts here with boycott and hometown headlines.
Absolutely. And we also want to say a quick thank you to our affiliates. Our first one being Net News Network. So you can find Net News Network at netnewsnetwork.net. We also want to say a thank you to Veterans for America First, as well as their media arm, Vet Voice. So with that in mind, Jamie, let's jump right into our first topic.
Yeah, so like myself and a few other people, you're probably a little bit extra exhausted today because you stayed up and watched C-SPAN a little bit later than usual and saw the 15th round, the 15th ballot, where Kevin McCarthy was finally, won the ballot for Speaker. So now the work actually begins.
Yes. So now that he has become Speaker, they've had the ceremonial passing of the gavel. So the next thing in line is to get this rules package passed.
And I just want to back up for a second because I think it's significant, to kind of talk about the fact of that, it's been exactly 100 years. It was 1923 when, we had more than one ballot for the Speaker of the House from the majority party, not getting on the same page. And it took a lot of understanding. And I think that as a party, we can all say that it's not necessarily that we disagreed with the holdouts at first. It was just that there's a proper way of doing things and there's a proper understanding of things.
Well, I wouldn't say that we didn't disagree with them from the beginning, because I did. I disagreed with them from the beginning just simply because of the fact that they didn't actually have a plan on anything. It was just obstruction, of which we saw a lot of very, very freshman members coming in, and that's all they've ever known.
Yeah. And to that, what I say is that because they were freshmen, majority of them, a lot of things they didn't understand. I think we talked about this on a previous show. A lot of things they just didn't understand, that, they could have done some of their requests already. But they wouldn't know that because they're freshmen. The other big thing for me was, like you said, that they didn't have a plan. They weren't prepared to do this. Mm-hmm. And another valid point was that, this was one of those things where they come up in the era of social media and allowing confrontational politics to kind of take a forefront when we disagree on this, when sometimes it has to take a back burner for, the Republic to work.
Well, I would disagree on that point wholeheartedly, because that wasn't confrontational politics.
It was. It's the basis of it. And here's what I mean by that, right?
That wasn't confrontational politics.
That's the basis of it.
No.
So for those of you who don't know, this ideology of confrontational politics is something that Justin and I argue about because, again, y'all have heard me say this before. I come from, the more passive George Bush era. And
why do you keep telling people that?
Because I don't mind. It's not a bad thing.
To each their own, I guess.
But and this when you combine the way that social media has affected politics, when you combine the way that we are now more connected, information travels at a speed of light. You try to figure out what news sources to trust, who to trust when their opinions are being given. It's interesting to see how that has kind of started to play out at a larger level, because in my school of thought, something like this would have been handled completely behind the scenes. The public would have never known it. And now, it's national news, and we're setting a record for something that hadn't been done in 100 years.
Well, I will say this. Yes, what they did was effective for them at a time, but it was detrimental to us and the overall process, because they are setting a precedent for anything going forward. If you don't like what the conference and what the party at large said at the time, what they as a body decided themselves, then you just cry, kick your feet, throw a tantrum, and you get your way. Although I will say and this is going to come up here in a little bit, that may come back to bite them in the backside.
And I think it's important to also note that, and I said this on social media, this was necessary, and it was necessary for it to happen this way. And I think we're going to be a stronger party because of it.
Well, I disagree with that.
And the reason why is because this is something that not has just been brewing inside of our elected officials, but this is something that's been brewing amongst Republicans. And to finally see this kind of back and forth of saying that of realization, right? Because now our leaders had to realize too that we're all in this together. We're all looking for trying to get forward through conservative principles, however far on the line of right that you are. We have to work together. Otherwise, everything shuts down and we don't go anywhere.
Yeah, but that's the thing. They weren't working together. They came and they said, these are my list of demands. Meet them or nothing.
I know. And what's interesting was the coming together. Like, I don't want to downplay it, right? Because it was big for us as a party. Okay. But the coming together of them choosing just to vote president is significant.
Well,
because that's them finally saying, okay, we understand. We will agree to disagree so we can move on, because that's not a hill to die on. There's so many other things that we have coming up that's a hill to die on.
And again, I disagree with you on that one. I think that they put themselves in a position to where they couldn't back out of it and save face. So this was their way of saving face.
I mean, I'm not denying that either, but I think that's the only way.
Tantrum. McCarthy came by, patted him on the back and said, "It's going to be okay." Gave him a cookie, and they said present. Which in and of itself, in discussions that Jamie and I have had, is, in my opinion, not a vote at all. But that's neither here nor there. And in this
counted.
That's the thing. It was not counted.
It was not counted
towards the total.
Wasn't counted towards the total, but it was counted as them as a body so that they can move forward.
But it wasn't counted.
Present was an option.
It was an option, but it shouldn't be an option. You're given choices. You make those choices. You have this choice or this choice or this choice or this choice. You can't say, "I'm here."
Yeah, you can.
Well, obviously you can.
It's a neutral choice. It's a neutral choice.
That's not neutral at all. That's just saying here.
That's neutral.
It's like taking attendance.
Here. I mean, think about if they had. I mean, I don't know. I don't even like thinking about that scenario. Like, what we would have disowned him, but what if somebody was mad enough to be disowned and voted for Jeffries? You know what I'm saying? Like they.
That would have been political suicide.
Political suicide, but I mean, they acted like they were mad enough to go for political suicide.
Oh no, there's no way they were going to do that. All they're doing is fundraising, and you can't disagree with that, because we both know this. I got 3 fundraising emails within a single day on Wednesday from one of the member elects.
Yep,
that was leading the charge in this.
Yep. And I like that individual. But that's what I say. That's the times we live in. It's some people do not understand the process, and that comes with being a freshman and you have to learn the difference in between governance and campaigning.
That was definitely what
and not
they
every
were doing
moment.
there.
Yep, not every moment is a moment to campaign just because you're mad.
Because outside of some of the concessions that were made on that, the rest of them were irrelevant.
We're already rules.
Not just already rules, but they're irrelevant because of the slim majority they have.
Well, yeah, that's valid too. You know, because I mean, like, and what I mean by that is some of the rule changes that they wanted to do were already set for them to do. They just didn't know that,
Like the amendments, yeah,
because they were freshmen. You know, so I mean,
I can see them sitting in the background kicking their LDs.
McCarthy was
on the back.
Was nice, gave him a sucker. You know, said, "Hey, look, like, you know, let's just get through this. Everything's gonna be okay, and then we'll just go from there." So
gave him a bigger seat at the table. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why you don't negotiate with terrorists, because now what's going to happen when another 5 group says, "Okay, we don't like where this is going now, so instead of banding together and hashing this out in committees like it's supposed to be done, we're going to do the same thing on the floor again and get all the TV time and all the press that they got."
Yep. Nothing. I mean, it's January 7th. You know, there's all the rules I've learned how to play by, you know, got thrown out the door anyway. But you know, it's a new era we're living in. But I think it's going to be interesting. And, you know, like I've said many times before, like this was not the hill to die on. There's a lot of other hills, and it's really going to be in the back of everybody's mind now. If we can't come together on speaker, how are we going to come together on, you know, very time sensitive, important issues that the House needs to immediately be working on? If we know now that 20 people can hold democracy hostage, what does that say about the status of the republic?
Yeah. So Ray Blankenship had something said on here. He says he's heavy in confrontational politics through my Second Amendment activism. If you don't fight for it, then you definitely don't get it. Expose those that are stumbling blocks and then take them out politically. I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. Confrontational politics is, and in my opinion, the best way to go about this. Although I will say what we saw an example of there on the Capitol Hill wasn't exactly confrontational politics.
I mean, it's a method. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't like the way that it's been used. I guess I'll put it that way. You know,
you just don't like it to begin with.
I don't like it to begin with, you know, because I'm from the, you know, the art of the deal. You know, there's at some point, you know what I mean? Like, you have to realize, especially internally, especially with people of like mindsets, that there's an agreement to be made. So why not try to negotiate first for the benefit of the party and the benefit of conservatives, versus giving ammo to our opponents because we want to fight publicly.
Yeah, I mean, they've known for 2 years that McCarthy was going to be running for the spot.
You had forever.
Yes, there were some.
You had your first half of your freshman, your first term. You had your whole
there
first term.
Some members that came on national TV and said, you know, we've been working on this for the past. No, you haven't. I know that for a fact. You haven't.
There's no way. You know, because like there's too much planning to involve for you all to stand up there. And like the thing that I guess the big turning point for me was the fact that they were nominating, like they kept bouncing around, right? But the fact that they nominated Jim Jordan, but didn't ask him. You know, Jim Jordan nominated McCarthy, but yet you had the holdouts going to nominate Jim Jordan. Tells me 2 things. One, you didn't talk to Jim Jordan about this at all. You know, because he would probably
he told you that he wasn't,
or he told you what he wasn't going to do, and you're just going to have somebody persuade, like, you know what I mean? You're going, I don't even know what the thought process is on that. And then you're going to bounce around.
It was a show. It was a joke. It wasn't really real.
And the other thing that I feel was hurtful and I'm just going to call a spade, right? The disrespect. You can
say that. I can't.
The disrespect to President Trump, right? Because I'm just going to call it what it is, right? Knowing that he's already announced his nomination for president, to turn around and try to nominate him for speaker is, in my opinion, a slap in the face. Because you now can't get your way, so now you're going to be disrespectful. I think that also goes to
why would you nominate somebody that's running for president and has all their focus in the presidential run to nominate them to come in and be the Speaker of the House?
Because you didn't like what he said. That's the bottom line. You know what I mean? You didn't like the fact that he understood that this was like a good leader should. This was not the hill to die on. So you openly disrespect him.
You're talking about after he came out and endorsed Kevin McCarthy for the second time.
Yep. And then for them to come out and say, well, I think that you should listen to us. All you did was not read the rule book, not understand how the process works, and then turn around and say, I don't understand. I don't even understand this either, to where, how have you been in here barely, right? Barely have your name out there and think that you can be chairman of a committee. Okay. They're not asking to be on a committee. They're asking to chair a committee, not be a part of a committee, not have an extra seat added for them to be on a committee, but chair it. That's a level of selfishness that, optimists like me just doesn't understand.
Again, all about the fundraising.
Yep.
Because if they're a chair committee, they'll have all of these industries coming to them, begging them for different things and giving them money. Yeah,
and see, that's the problem for me, is like, we understand that because, we're quote unquote insiders, right? But the American people don't understand that, which was what to me was the most disheartening thing, because you just can't come out and say, because I'm not going to be disrespectful, and come out and say that they're lying to you because they have their own selfish interests that they want to pursue, and they are doing this for that reason, right? Because I don't know that for sure, but that's the perception that I have, knowing how the process works. So for someone who doesn't know how the process works, they feel that they're standing up for something that they may believe in, when actuality there's something going on that we don't know, may never know, behind the scenes.
I mean, if that was something that they actually believed in and that they actually felt should not have happened, you would not have seen those present votes.
They'd have left.
Yes. Well, I mean, they would have continued to say no. They would have continued to block and to keep this from moving forward.
Yeah, or just left.
Conceit. Well, if they had left, then it would have lowered the threshold.
I get that, right? But I think one thing that
if it was truly a never Kevin movement, they would have continued to vote against Kevin,
and we'd still be here.
Present. Yes.
And we'd still be here if they had a true feeling for it, and
because that says a lot about them. The fact that they conceded and that they gave in to this means that they are not willing to actually stand up for something that they felt so strongly and so passionate about.
And and
a lot of, some of them actually came out and said, if this guy is voted in as speaker, I will resign. And they came back and voted for him.
And Biggs came in and voted president and walked out. I have a little bit more respect for him because of that, because take it whatever you want to, right? If you're really disheartened about something, if I don't like using the phrase fall in line, but if you realize you're doing this for the country and for the betterment of the people, right? And you're still mad, right? Do what you're supposed to do and then leave, right? I understand that a lot more than I do the temper tantrum and the calling the press conference and the, sending out the fundraising emails. I have a higher level of respect to someone who stood their ground until they could not stand it anymore. And then once the game was over, they didn't shake hands and they left. I get that. I don't understand the other side.
I'm going home.
I'm good. Yeah. You guys, I'm going home.
But so that leads us to the other part of this. The rules package with the concessions that were made. Do you think it's going to go through as is?
No.
I don't either. Just simply because of the fact that you're going to have, yes, there were some great things that came on the conservative mindset and the conservative ideology behind that. There were some great things that were conceded to that went into that. It's not just the thought of the moderates that could potentially hurt them in there. And this is outside of that. I don't think it's going to happen just because of the retribution, because of what just happened.
Well, similar in line with what you're saying. the hard part for me is this was a great win as a party, but we're not there yet. You know, we now have a base level of understanding. We have a cornerstone, right? But we're still trying to lay the foundation of what the future is going to be. And I don't think that we are there yet to get the rules package done as is.
I got you. That is the rules package now, as is, with the
Yes.
concessions that were made
Yes.
and everything along that line. And I agree with you wholeheartedly with that, because there are some things in there that were truly very conservative in nature, and that's going to cause a lot of moderates to pause for a moment because they're thinking, well, I've got to run for re-election on this.
And this, you know, call it what it is. In certain areas, they're the fact that they're going to vote on these rules is not going to be okay for some of these Republicans who just, you know, already just flipped a district.
Mhm.
You know, the district that was flipped in California and New York, that's going to be a hard one for them.
And I'll also say, like I said earlier, I think that some people are going to vote no just simply because
It's
of
Kevin
the
McCarthy's rules.
concessions. Well, no, not that at all. They're going to vote no because of the concessions that Kevin McCarthy made to these, I'm going to call them political terrorists in this sense, and the fact that they threw a tantrum and got their way by having these concessions made. They're going to vote no just because of these guys getting these concessions. They're just going to say, look.
You took a different angle than I did.
Yeah,
I see that.
I'm going to say what I'm saying there is because of the concessions that were made with this, people are going to vote no on that as a flipping the bird to those that
held it hostage.
Exactly.
And I think the people who held it hostage are going to use this as another example to say, you know,
if we don't get this, we're not going forward.
We want more. Yeah.
That'll be an interesting that'll be interesting to see whether or not they're going to try, if they're not able to get the rules package through as is, whether or not removing some of the concessions that were made because it couldn't get through with the vote. Like some of them kept saying they don't have the votes for it. Whether or not they're going to be able to get this through. Yeah. It's going to be curious to see on that one.
And you know, I don't know. We're just so far in the beginning that these are things that used to be just more like, I don't know, ceremonial, you know, that now have become focal points. And looking at that, you know, we have a lot of work to get done. And if we can't get past the things that traditionally are ceremonial, what like, you know what I mean? Like what does that mean for when we start to pull things out of committees? What does that mean for when we need to take like hard stances on important issues? Like, you know,
securing the border,
get rid of CRT, like stopping the transition to children without parents' information. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how do we expect, how does the American people expect Congress to get along on the critical things if the things that for 100 years were just processes we're fighting over?
That's a good thought. That's one that I hadn't really considered yet. I like that. So part of it, and I think this is going to play a big role into it, is exactly what not just the first or the second piece of legislation is going to be, what the third and the fourth may be. Because we know, or we've been promised, that as soon as the rules package goes through, then the first course of action is defunding these 87,000 IRS agents that are coming through. Okay, the Republicans will get behind that and vote that down. What about the one that comes after that? What about the piece of legislation that is going to, let's say, for instance, secure the border? Are we going to see a bunch of Republicans coming in and demanding that the amnesty portion of that be included with that piece of legislation?
Yeah, I don't think so. That's I get where you're going with that. Like, where does it end, right? But I don't know. I still believe that there are still some fundamental things that, even though we're fighting internally, there's still some fundamental things that we're just not gonna we're not gonna budge on. along with amnesty, I think that was the other thing when it was like, okay, McCarthy, you better not cross the aisle. You better work with these 20 people on the Republican side to get the vote, and we'll sit here all night versus you trying to flip a Democrat. Because the moment you do that, we are going to go find somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's the same conversation when it comes to some of that piece of legislation. But how long is it going to take for them to get it in and out of committee and on the floor to be voted on? If we can't think, you know what I mean, if they're fighting internally because they're mad because they're not in a higher seat, like, you know, like.
So we got another comment on here, and this is from Reagan Box. It says, I'm hoping they did it to open the people's eyes to everything going on in Congress, such as no debating bills, party leaders passing bills without the whole of Congress, people not being allowed on committees, etc. Hopefully it was an eye-opener for Republicans and Democrats. Otherwise, it just shows division within a party. Now, I agree with a lot of that. But that was also a lot of this stuff came under the Democrat administration, which had been under Nancy Pelosi for quite a while.
What you're talking about is the fact that, you know,
now that we have leadership and that we are in control of that, we will control the rules with this.
Because because of the roll call vote that, you know, Congresswoman Green put up, there's no more of people just voting and not being present. That everyone is it basically is roll call every time.
Yeah. So a lot of this is a lot of these bills were debated on the floor. You had people that came up, gave that they spoke on the floor in favor or against the bill. A lot of this happened. It as a matter of fact, it happened in just about well every large bill that came up, any large public bill that came through. But the fact that the reinstitution of the roll call votes made it to where these members had to come in to vote with us. They weren't necessarily coming down to vote to debate this. They were coming in to vote on it, yes or no. But again, I understand where she's going with this. Yes, it's going to have it had the debate or had the effect of debate or having that debate and that discussion that's going on. But that debate and that discussion was already happened. It already happens. It does. It may not be in the public eye. It may not be broadcast on national TV. And the reason why you saw every member of Congress sitting in there is because of that roll call vote. They had to go by their name by name. It wasn't you came in, you swiped your card, you hit a button, and then left. You had to be in there when your name was called, and you had to pass, and you had to vote yes or no. Or
which is different because, and that's why, you know, I call it a process.
This will not
it will not happen that way ever again.
It won't happen in the regular debate.
I see what we're talking about now, right? Because this was different because before Congress can move forward, they have to pick a speaker. They can't be sworn in as House representatives until the speaker is chosen by the elected body. So the 118th Congress cannot convene until they pick a speaker, which is why everybody saw it this way. I will say this though. I think it's interesting how, and I'm learning this too, you know, when politics is all you eat, when everyone you know is involved in politics, your friends, everyone else, you forget that some things aren't necessarily normal. And, you know, C-SPAN being on my, you know, return channel button all the time is not normal for most people. So when these debates do happen, like they are televised, they're just at weird hours or weird times when they're live. Usually most people are at work when they're going on because they're at work up there.
And it's
so
not
most people
covered
don't see
by
it.
major media outlets unless there was a very impassioned and very good speech, or unless it was a sound bite that they thought would get a broader audience. I mean, debates happen on the floor
and it's
a
boring.
lot more than what people think they do.
Yeah, and it's boring. Like it's not like this. Like, to be clear, anybody who watched C-SPAN for the last couple of weeks, that's not C-SPAN. That's not what we watch. We like what entertains us is a lot more boring than that. But a lot of that, even the committee hearings, everything else is on C-SPAN, C-SPAN 2, C-SPAN 3, and
etc.
And you can see them all. but it's been different seeing it be more enthusiastic, however that word's supposed to go with the pre suffix. But anyway, because this was a historic moment. We've been living through history for the last 20 years, and once again we enter a new year and we set a new record of something that hasn't happened in a long time.
True, but just to go back for just a couple of moments there, it's not a suffix.
Whatever. I know. I was literally just throwing stuff out there to like get past in my head where I was.
See where it's stuck on the wall.
Yeah. I was like, it's the ending of the word. That's the only word that popped in my head that was even close to that. But anyway.
Oh wait. Well, let's look at taking a different or taking on a different topic. But before we do that, we do like to remind our viewers to make sure they are hitting the like button and the share button on any of the content that we do produce, as well as subscribing to any of the content that they do see on any of the platforms that we release our content on. That way, you'll always be able to stay in the know for when Jamie and I do release these productions, as well as always be able to come back and see the heartwarming smile and hear that roaringly infectious laughter. We also encourage our viewers to make sure they're going to our website at conservativetalk.org and hitting that sponsor tab to help Jamie and I to be able to continue to produce this content to eventually one day be able to take over the world.
I don't know where he comes up with this stuff sometimes.
Well, it's the voices. They tell me what to say.
Buck, what have you been saying, Dan?
it's the voices in my head. But with that, let's look at what happened down in New Orleans on Friday.
Yeah, this is pretty major, really.
Yeah. So for those who were, it was what? It was 2017, 2018, 2017.
Las Vegas.
Yeah, there was a massive public shooting that happened in Las Vegas. The demon who orchestrated that shooting used an addition to a firearm or several firearms that he had known as a bump stock. So what that bump stock does is mechanically it allows for when you pull the trigger back, the firearm recoils and it slides back. Well, because of the way the bump stock is designed, it is almost kind of like a sheath. So the rear of that firearm is sliding back in that sheath. Well, you maintain where your trigger finger is. So it's recoiling and resetting the trigger and pushing itself forward. And that action in of itself is two processes. So because you are not taking your finger and holding the trigger down and the trigger mechanism itself causing continuous firing, the firearm itself is shifting back and forth.
Boom, 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 yes. Boom, 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 boom.
And it allows for a higher rate of speed to be fired.
Which is the difference between that and like
in a machine gun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As defined by the ATF. But what happened with that, because of that mass shooting, there was a massive public outcry. I mean, President Trump and all of his wisdom, what he's done, issued an executive order. And that executive order directed the Attorney General to tell the ATF to redefine what a bump stock is. And the ATF then turned around and classified it as a machine gun and gave I forgot how long exactly it was. I think it was somewhere around about 6-month mark for all of the firearms that had or all the bump stocks out there, not the firearms and bump stocks, but just the bump stocks themselves, be either turned into the federal government or destroyed. No other option, or you became a felon for owning one. So essentially what this ruling does, not only is it a massive win for the Second Amendment, but it's a massive win just for the regulatory body making or the regulatory bodies for making arbitrary rules themselves without actually going through the regulatory process.
So let's talk about what happened in Louisiana. Because it was the it was the appeals court. Like talk about.
So
that.
It went through, and I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know if the lower federal court had turned it down or had affirmed the case, but it went to the appeals court for, I believe it was the 6th district there. Mm-hmm. So that court in a full body, meaning all 16 judges, issued a ruling with this that came down that said, well, 13 of these 16 judges said, we agree with the plaintiff on this. We agree that the ATF classified this mechanism wrong. And we also agree that the process that they used for this classification was wrong. So now you have conflicting rulings. You've had several districts believe it was the West Coast district. I know the Washington district had also issued a ruling that shot down the bump stock overturning. So now you have conflicting rulings. When you have conflicting rulings, well, even the Supreme Court upheld some of these, or upheld this being shot down, and upheld the ban in itself. But now that you have conflicting rulings, it is going to be much more likely that the Supreme Court is actually going to have to take this issue up.
Because see, that was my next question. Because usually, when you have it, a conflicting ruling come out, the Supreme Court picks it up. Do you think they'll pick it up? Like, honestly,
there's
or do you think they'll just go with the appeals ruling?
Well, technically, they have the states that are covered by the Western Court there. I believe it was the 11th Circuit that did it. The states that are covered by that, the Supreme Court upheld that. So then the states that were upheld by the 6th is technically that's the deal until the Justice Department appeals the ruling to the Supreme Court. Then the Supreme Court would then have to take it up in of itself to overturn it.
Interesting. So since you have two separate circuit court of appeals who have conflicting decisions, now the Justice Department has to come in and bring
the Justice Department was the one this case was filed against.
So
it's been Biden's administration
walk us through that.
It.
Yeah, so walk us through that. So how does it get who's going to be the plaintiff to the Supreme Court?
That would be the Justice Department on that one, because they're going to have to appeal it to the Supreme Court. And then the defendant will be the gentleman who came in and filed the original case. So the fact that he's going to have to defend the ruling on that one, they are going to then have to actually take up the case in order to overturn it. They can't just say, we disagree with this as a body, then you have to look at it again. They actually have to take it up. They have to grant certiorari. They have to take the case on full, hear it, and then send it back. They can't just arbitrarily overturn it.
So which is another question that I have that I think a lot of other people have too. So there could be a period to where it is completely banned on the West Coast in the 11th Circuit, but in the 6th or any other court that
10th Circuit. That's right. The 10th. We're the 11th.
I thought, okay.
We're the 14th Congressional District.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about the 9th. But anyway, see, this is why I'm asking questions instead of trying to answer anything, because this whole process will get me confused. But the thought process that I'm going through right now is there's a time, because of the way that we split it up, to where you can get a felony on one part of the country, but you can be freely to use something in the other part.
Technically, yes. If you can
until the Supreme Court
buy it, yes. If you can find one, buy it, and or if you had one buried in the backyard, or if you go out into the river where your boat overturned and you lost it in the water and somehow miraculously recover it, yes, it could be legal there.
Yeah, I don't know. This whole thing scares me for this reason, right? And Justin and I have talked about this. I get nervous when you start seeing precedent like this set by an administration, especially when you start seeing history repeat itself.
Well, we're seeing the effect of this precedent now with the whole pistol brace movement, as well as the reclassification of firearms.
Well, and my big thing for me is this, it was almost 100 years ago, about 90 years ago now, that American citizens were forced to turn in their gold and silver under penalty of imprisonment. And we are now 10 years away from that 100-year mark, and you have an administration who's trying to force people to turn in their guns under penalty of imprisonment. How long until we get to the point to where history repeats itself?
We're seeing it now. I mean, you have an administration that comes out and said, "Get vaccinated, or you can't work. Buy
But
EVs, or you can't drive."
in my mind, right, like these are still testing grounds. They're still trying to see what works and what doesn't before they force us, like truly force us. And that's what keeps me up at night, is because that's the battle. That's the silent battle that I think we really are fighting. Is at some point, the left is going to try to martial law us under some form, under some condition, and they're testing it. By saying, we want to take your guns, we want to force you to do this, because it's almost conditioning.
We'll see how much compliance we have.
Correct. And at what point does a generation become fully compliant? And you know what I mean? Like our generation will never be fully compliant. They'll kill half of us. The generation before us will die with us. The generation after us probably will be chipped. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that, like, where's the line? And I think that's the line that we hold, which is why when I go back to things like, you're mad about who the speaker is, like, I don't care about that.
Yeah, especially because of the fact that, what they're going to do in Congress is going to have a very little or limited effect on us at our local everyday level.
I said it, a million times. I'm so glad that we live in a beautiful state like the state of Georgia, because this is a little bit over exaggerated, but the federal government can shut down and we still be in great shape.
It did it for a week. We're still good to go.
But we'll still be in great shape here.
Mm-hmm.
And we have great local governments here in North Georgia.
We will.
We have great local governments here in North Georgia.
We will.
And we have great representation even at the federal level for around here. And so I think we would be fine. But this is another time to highlight that, the important battles are here locally.
Mm-hmm.
These are where we win, to make sure that if all heck does break loose, our livelihoods will remain the same, because we put great local government in place.
Now, I couldn't agree with you more. Your municipal elections have more consequence than any state or excuse me, any federal level elections, presidential elections, any of that have more consequence when it comes to your everyday life than anybody at the federal level will have.
Yep.
So that's one of the big things that we really want to emphasize, is that this year you will have municipal elections. So make sure that you are getting out and vetting these candidates that are going to be running, vetting your current sitting incumbents, looking for those who might have an interest in getting out and running against these incumbents, if these incumbents are not filling what you see as being needed to be done.
And I encourage everyone, like, I mean, if you are interested in running,
reach out to Jamie.
Well, yes, or your local, GOP, if you're a conservative mindset, because one thing that we've learned, especially from 2020 to now, is appointments, nonpartisan positions are the most important thing, because it's one thing when someone has to be accountable because they have to put a party by their name. It's another when they don't.
Yep, absolutely. And it's a lot easier for those to sneak by without a letter next to their name than it is for those that have a letter next to their names.
Yep. So we gotta be mindful of that, and we gotta get out. And just because it's not a presidential year yet, there's still some voting that needs to occur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are going to be some of the, like we said, these are going to be some of the ones that are going to affect you a lot closer to home than what the federal level elections are, or even the statewide level elections are.
Yeah, I mean, if you live in a city, like, this is what affects your millage rate.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you pay in taxes. Yeah. This is why your garbage wasn't picked up. This is why, like, your water is dirty. Like, this is what literally affects every moment of your life.
Or why you're paying tens of millions of dollars for a piece of property that certain government officials are trying to use for affordable housing rather than turn it into profitable live workspaces.
Yeah, or why, I had this conversation going through a part of town earlier today, and it's amazing how different we've become. And I mean that from an ideological standpoint, okay? One of the greatest things that I love was opportunity zones, okay? Because opportunity zones benefited those people who actually moved into a low income area and said, I want to make this place better. I
Mhm.
not only am going to put forth the effort to invest my dollar here or put my business here, but I'm going to live here and help change the environment, right?
Oh yeah.
Whereas a tax allocation district only means that like that's basically people are going to come in from wherever and get the tax benefit. It astonishes me how people still can be fooled by this liberal Democrat mindset of I'm trying to help the poor, but I'm going to do it through a tax allocation district and have, you know, whoever come in and gentrify our neighborhood. So like you're doing the
Gentrify.
whatever. You're doing the complete opposite of what you say that you're doing. Whereas if you would take a step back and listen to what something like opportunity zone would be, that's the ideal reason of trying to help someone in a low income area. Like that's what the model was for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you would know. It's what you do for a living.
That's it.
Well, with that in mind, we have reached that inevitable conclusion with every episode, and that is the end. So we do want to make sure that we are encouraging viewers to make sure they are hitting the like button and the share button on any platform they run across any of our content, as well as making sure they are subscribing to this platform where our content is released. That way, you'll always stay up to date. You'll always be able to see Jamie's heartwarming smile and always be able to hear that roaring, infectious laughter.
And George and Justin talking about North Georgia draw.
Poke. We also like to encourage viewers
The
to go
L
to
is
our
silent.
website at conservativestalk.org and hitting that sponsor tab in the upper right hand corner or the lower right hand corner and helping us out with what you're able to. You will be directly contributing to Jamie and I one of these days taking over the world, and it will be because of you.
I just want an Angus beef farm when I retire. That's
Small dreams. Small dreams. We also want to say a quick thank you to our affiliates, and that's Net News Networks. You can find Net News Network at netnewsnetwork.net. That's a mouthful. We also want to say a quick thank you to Veterans for America First and their media arm, Vet Voice. So, with that in mind, Jamie, do you have any final thoughts?
Get active, get involved. I think it's very important that we really go out and try to understand some of the processes that are going on and some of the things that these people, regardless of who they are angling for. Now's the time to really start doing more of your own research and looking at who's giving you your information.
Yes, well said. Well said, as always. But with that, we want to say thank you for watching. This is Conservative Talk, and we will see y'all soon.